All right, I'm going to go over chapter 14. All right, chapter 14 is about autonomic nervous system. Another way is abbreviated as ANS, autonomic nervous system. All right, uh, so in previous chapter where we had control over the effector, if you recall, we mentioned that you have receptor information via the sensory neuron goes to the control center. And from the control center, information exit to the effector. So basically, this is still the idea, except that on effector, we mentioned a lot of muscles and glands, and these are a skeletal muscle, like in neuromuscular junction. So what happens in the neuromuscular junction? We have control over it. Via your photoreceptor, for example, you saw and observed the red light, and the control center integration took place. In other words, the red light meaning what? Meaning you have to stop, translate and calculate and make a sense of it, all that in the brain. And then via the motor neuron, which was here, motor neuron, information exit the central nervous system and we get to the effector. So the effector, you move your muscles, press on the gas or whatever, pulling to the right and so on. So this is, because we have control over the effectors, this is known as a somatic nervous system. Somatic nervous system is mostly involved in the things that we have control with, okay? Now, what we're going to get at is we wanted to find out the differences between the somatic nervous system versus autonomic nervous system. All right? So before we go on to the autonomic nervous system, if you recall that these motor neurons, and similarly with the receptors too, you had, long axon, and then your effector was the skeletal muscle. In this case, let's pretend this is the muscle. Huh? So you release the acetylcholine right here, all right, neuromuscular junction, review that. And then as a result of series of events that I'm not going to go over, and you pretty much familiar with cross-bridge cycle and contraction and excitation and all that stuff, muscle contracts, all right? So what about the autonomic nervous system? How is the autonomic nervous system is different from somatic nervous system? That's what we wanted to get at, all right? Interestingly enough, when we hear autonomic, kind of like reminds of automatic. In other words, these are the things that we don't have control over with, all right? So that's what we're gonna get at. What I draw over here was an idea of somatic nervous system. Now I wanted to go over the autonomic nervous system. We're gonna go back and forth and review the links, the similarities and the differences between the two systems. Let's go ahead and take a look at autonomic nervous system. All right, so instead of the skeletal muscle, now the motor neuron, as we discussed earlier, coming in from the central nervous system, innervates. Innervates means it stimulates a smooth muscle and the cardiac muscle, and also some glands. So notice that if you exercise, or if you get scared, or if there is an emergency, your heart rate automatically, autonomic, automatically is going to go up, all right? So you don't have any control over it, versus in somatic nervous system, you had control over it, okay? In other words, when you hear a siren, you have control over your muscles, whether to pull over or not. And in fact, some people, they continue driving, all right? So, that is the idea and so on. So this is adjusting for requiring what the body requires, what the body needs. This is via subconscious control. Again, automatically happens. Most of the effectors are visceral. That means it's organ. All right, we're like an organ of the heart, for example, an organ of digestive system, for example. Those type of things. So how are they different than the somatic nervous system? Let's go ahead and take a look at the differences now. In three areas we wanted to take a look at: effector, efferent pathway, efferent, remember, exit from central nervous system. So how they are exiting, the type of neurotransmitters are involved, that is important. Target organ response. What does it do to the organs? Yeah, the effectors are different or hard, but what does it do to it? Does it increase? Does it decrease? Does more contraction, let's say, on the heart occurs, less contraction occurs? What is happening? That's a little bit different on the somatic nervous system comparing to the autonomic nervous system. So remember, the effector for the central nervous system, for somatic nervous system, was a skeletal muscle. That we had control over it. But in autonomic nervous system, we know that is not the case. In ANS, all right, via the motor activity, you have a smooth muscle, usually smooth muscles are located on our organs that usually are hollow. Think about your stomach, has a layer of a smooth muscle. Think about your digestive tract, esophagus, small intestine, large intestine, they have a smooth muscle. So as the blood vessels, all right? So again, they are automatic. You're not controlling at will the diameter of your blood vessel to increase or decrease. They do that automatically depending on your body needs, all right? Sometimes you're exercising, your blood vessel diameter increases to bring in more flow to the muscle, let's say, right? Okay, so that's the idea that we wanted to kind of like understand. And also you have the cardiac muscle, right? Cardiac muscle. And glands. Well, what kind of glands? Well, I can think of like, few glands, but basically one of the glands would be the adrenal glands. Adrenal glands, as you know, is on top of the kidneys, and they produce different type of hormones, depends on your stress level, and so on. All right. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at so that was the differences. Let me add to it a little bit and give you idea about so we know about the effectors, right? Now let's go ahead and take a look at the efferent pathways. What is the efferent pathways have anything to do with this? All right. So again, when we say efferent pathway, think about the motor neurons. All right. The motor neurons in SNS, somatic nervous system, they are having heavily myelinated axon, right? So increase or heavily myelinated. What was myelinated axon? If you remember earlier lecture, I told you the axon that are myelinated, you can do the saltatory conduction, and the conduction is going to go very fast, all right? So in the somatic nervous system, let's bring it maybe over here, or we can actually go to the one of these blank pages so I could draw this a little bit for you differently, huh? All right. So this is in somatic nervous system, all right? And you have the cell body, and usually the cell body happen to be in the central nervous system, in the brain and the spinal cord, and you had the long axons, and these axons we mentioned had a lot of myelinated sheets around them. These are the Schwann cells that wrap around, and recalling from previous lecture, electrical impulses, they jump from one to another node. These nodes are called nodes of Ranvier, and this phenomenon was called saltatory conduction. All right. So basically, eventually, this is a motor neuron, and your muscle can contract as a result of the association of the neuromuscular junction. And interestingly enough, this is quite fast. Think about how fast you could move your muscles right now. How long does it take for you to, write something down or turn around or snap your finger? It's very, very quick and fast. All right. Again, one of the reasons why is these myelinated sheets and long axons. There's no interruption. There's no gap in between. Electrical impulses right away gets to the muscles, and they're releasing their neurotransmitter, which we're going to get into next. And basically, that's what happens. All right. So this is the efferent pathway in the somatic nervous system. Okay. As might as well talk a little bit about the neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter involved in here was always acetylcholine. If you recall, acetylcholine in the skeletal muscle had excitatory function. In other words, it excites the muscle. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at the efferent pathway in autonomic nervous system. In autonomic nervous system, or ANS, there is always two neurons that are involved. All right. So it's not one long axon and one long neuron, but from the central nervous system, you have preganglionic and you have postganglionic neuron. So the first one we call pre-ganglionic, and the second one we call post-ganglionic. All right, and the reason why we call it ganglionic, why not pre-synaptic neuron and post-synaptic neuron? Because you have some kind of a connective tissues in here, and this is called ganglia. For a better picture, you could Google it or you could look that up, all right? But this is the ganglia. This ensures the communication taking place between the two, preganglionic and the postganglionic, all right? But you could have, in this case, is a short preganglionic neuron and the postganglionic neuron. But you could have a longer postganglionic neuron. And a shorter postganglionic neuron. All right. So again, this is one of the differences. Now there are ganglion in here too. All right. Now, as far as the first one that we're going to be talking about, all right, these are lightly myelinated right here. Well, they're actually short, right? And then this one is also lightly myelinated. All right. So it still is fast, but it's not as fast. And there is an interruption in between as well. Now, the neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters between the preganglionic and postganglionic is always acetylcholine. So earlier we mentioned this, that is the same as somatic nervous system. So these two happen to be acetylcholine. They're both acetylcholine. All right. However, on the postganglionic, you could have two variety of them. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. On the ones that has a longer preganglionic and shorter postganglionic, still this one is going to be acetylcholine too. Okay. However, on the one that has a longer postganglionic, this one right here is neuroepinephrine. Neuroepinephrine is another neurotransmitter. We discussed this. It could have a stimulatory effect, and we can talk a little bit about that shortly. All right. But I just wanted to tell you that somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system, which we are looking at right now, all right, they have different neurotransmitters. Okay. All right. Next up, I wanted to take a look at, remember, the first neuron are lightly myelinated, so the speed is not. And another difference is there are two neurons instead of one long one when you're comparing it to the somatic nervous system. All right. So there are differences between them. There are differences between the neurotransmitters and their effect as well. All right. Now, on the autonomic nervous system, on the motor response, there are actually two different types. One of them is called the sympathetic division. Sympathetic division is the one that is on top right here. This one is sympathetic. And the bottom one right here, so this includes the two neurons, by the way. The bottom one right here, this is a parasympathetic. Parasympathetic, so this is two division now, okay? Now we wanted to take a look at other differences between sympathetic and parasympathetic, because in somatic nervous system, you just had one. There wasn't two division, it was just one division, right? So these two division of the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic, they pretty much counter one another. They counter one another. So let's go ahead and take a look at sympathetic system first. I'll give you an example, and again, don't memorize this example. I might give you a different examples on your exam, or on your assignments, or sometimes even you want to know what happens. So sympathetic activity, they prime the body for high energy consuming activity. That means you're going to need a lot of energy in order to do that, all right? And is usually related to what we call as E-related activity. So I'm just going to put the big E in here to remind you that this is E-related activities, all right? Usually that is the case. Well, what is the E stands for? E for excitement, E for emergency, E for embarrassment, E for exercise, all right? All of these events, you need to consume a lot of energy. And sometimes this, you might have heard about this, is known as fight or flight, right? Fight or flight relationship. You have to make a decision to flee from a dangerous situation, or you have to make a decision to fight. All right. So let's take a look at the example of this, and then we'll go to the parasympathetic activity. Let's say you're camping, and while you're camping in your area, all of a sudden you notice a bear approaching you. All right. And of course, bears usually get attracted to the sense of the smell because you were cooking something and that attracted the bear. All right, so the bear is slowly walking towards your camp area. Think about all the things that happens. All right, in this case, are you going to get excited? Are you going to be relaxed? Are you, nothing is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? All right. Well, in this kind of case, probably you are more alert now. Okay. In other words, this is kind of like an emergency. You got to decide, do you want it to fight the bear or you want to flee from it? You know, so while you're alert, you have to make your calculation and think about what you want to do. For example, if the log nearby, you might want it to lift up the log and protect yourself and family. If nobody's around and you notice the distance from you and the bear are kind of like far, maybe you decide to just run away. I don't know what you will do, all right? But you're definitely, most likely, if this is the first time seeing this bear coming in and approaching your camp area, you're probably going to, your heart rate is going to go up, you're scared, it's emergency situation, etc. All right. So most of the time, usually the blood flow to the muscle increases at this point in time. In other words, your blood vessels is going to dilate going in towards the muscle. All right. But blood vessels going into the other organs probably is going to be reduced. For example, not much blood is going to go to your digestive tract. All right, because they're going, remember, you have a set amount of blood volume. If you have a set amount of blood, if you send a whole bunch of them to the muscles, then there would be less available for the other organs. It doesn't make sense to have so much blood that you could send it everywhere. It doesn't work that way. Imagine that you have a country that has a certain soldiers. If you concentrate your soldiers, let's say, in one area, there's going to be less soldier available on the other area. It's kind of like that, okay? So, so you are threatened by this, seeing the bear, and also, your blood flow increases to the muscle. Now you could fight or flight either way, all right? Your skin is probably cold and sweaty. Your pupil is going to dilate. Dilation of the pupil bringing more light. Here is the opening right here. So dilation right here is the pupil. This is the darker spot. All right. So it gets really big. When it gets really big, that means more light is going in. Why do you want to have more light going in? Again, because you're more alert. You wanted to calculate things, the distance between you and the bear, for example, in this case. You wanted to see what are your options. You are visualizing a tree nearby. You have an option to climb there. You're visualizing a rock. Maybe you wanted to get the rock and throw at him. You're seeing like maybe a lake nearby that you could just maybe jump or go away from the harm's way. Whatever the case might be, you need more light coming in for these purposes. Huh? All right, so we are looking at sympathetic activity, folks. All right. You can think about other events that are taking place. So again, now we can talk a little bit about the organs, and we can talk about a little bit about the what will happen during the autonomic nervous system in terms of the organ, the response, and so on. And why do you think that is? All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to fast forward. We're going to come back to the parasympathetic because that's coming up next. All right, so this is slide. You can see the sympathetic activity right here. And again, as far as the eye goes, the pupil dilation occurring. All right, so let's go one by one. Salivary glands. Now remember, when you are in a fight or flight, all the digestive related organs, they are being inhibited because again, you want your attention to fight or flight. You don't care about digestion. Less blood flow goes to the organs. In terms of salivary glands, it will be inhibited during this activity. In other words, you don't produce that much saliva. You're not digesting food anymore. All right. Your attention is on the target. All right. If you ever went to the interview or you gave a presentation or you were nervous about something, you feel your mouth is really, really dry. All right. And that's the reason why, because salivary glands are being inhibited. Now, what about the lungs? Do you think when you see the bear or you're in an emergency situation or when you're scared, do you think your lungs is going to work more and you're breathing faster or you're going to slow down? What do you think? Pause the video if you want to guess. Remember, you're looking at the bear, it's coming towards you. Are you going to breathe normal? All right? No. You're going to excite the lungs. In other words, you're going to breathe faster, heavier, because you need more oxygen, more blood to the tissues. In this case, not all the tissues, organ of the muscular tissues, skeletal muscle. All right. For that, you need more oxygen to send in. All right. So that's why your breathing rate increases as well. When you're scared, your breathe is faster. Some athletes, they get excited right before their game. That's really important, say it's a Super Bowl or World Cup or whatever, what happened is the lungs is going to go faster now. Sometimes this might be referred to as, oh, I have a butterfly in my stomach. No, it's not a butterfly, it's the actual lungs beating faster rate. And so as the heart and combination of the heart. So you want the heart to work harder because you want to pump more blood to the skeletal muscles so you could flee, in this case, from the bear. All right? The stomach, pancreas, liver, gallbladder, all of those are being inhibited now. Why are they being inhibited? We mentioned this already, because you're not digesting any food. You're sending the blood somewhere else that is needed. You're concentrating your soldier at where the conflict is going to be at. Now, adrenal gland is a gland on top of the kidneys. It does produce lots of different hormones, but in our case, it can produce neuroepinephrine and epinephrine, and as a result of that, the body can get, they can produce hormones that are related to the stress, all right? So this is going to get stimulated further, all right? It's never a good idea to be nervous when you're eating because, again, your adrenal gland is producing these hormones, and these hormones, they're going to have a excitatory effect on the heart, in the lungs, and there's going to have inhibitory effect on the digestive system. So your digestion is not going to be that good, all right? And a lot of times, people sometimes, that's what happens. They're nervous, but they're eating, but they're not really digesting food the way that they should. Now, the next one is a little bit tricky. urinary bladder. And you might have seen in the movie, like all of a sudden somebody's scared and wet themselves and so on. But this is as a different result. For example, because the internal pressure increases, all right, the sphincters holding the urine cannot withstand that pressure, and that's why it's happening. But the normal urination requires you to contract these muscles and empty the urinary bladder. In order for that to happen, you need to be relaxed, not tense, not emergency. So this urinary bladder and contraction of the smooth muscle, actually, they're going to be inhibited. Now, in terms of the genitals, you could think about ejaculation, also starts with E. During the sexual intercourse, the moment of experiencing orgasm, your heart rate is increasing, your respiratory rate is increasing, all right? And you are excited, sympathetic activity. And as a result of that, also the ejaculation is right after that. So again, that experience followed by ejaculation, that's also the sympathetic activity, all right? Because E for excitement. So notice in this figure, here's the autonomic nervous system, the two motor division or the sympathetic and parasympathetic. And again, in this, they're showing you the neurotransmitters. They're showing you the short preganglionic and long postganglionic, lightly myelinated axon. And in this case, it can stimulate the adrenal gland. All right, so you could see the neurons, adrenal gland, and the adrenal gland can produce epinephrine or neuroepinephrine. They can go into the blood, and again, they can have a similar effect. Most of the time, the neuroepinephrine is a vasoconstrictor. When the vasoconstriction is occurring, what happens? The blood vessels is going to get this smaller in diameter. That's what happens for the most of the organ, all right? But you're rushing the blood where? Somewhere else, like your skeletal muscle. So again, it's neuroepinephrine. Also, we mentioned that is a stimulatory EPSP on the heart, and versus acetylcholine, we mentioned it has both effect. It has an inhibitory on the heart, okay? So in addition to that, we went over other organs and what it can do. Now we wanted to go over the parasympathetic division. So let's find our previous parasympathetic division, all right? And again, it has a long preganglionic and short postganglionic. And now this could be your effector. So notice that the ganglia is actually closer to the effector. Right in here, the ganglia is actually closer. You remember that this part right over here in the central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, things like that. So in this case, the ganglia is closer to the central nervous system. All right, let's say that that bear that you were observing and you were nervous about, before you did anything else, the bear turned around and left your camp area. Maybe, changed his mind or saw that it's dangerous also for him. He actually experienced a sympathetic activity too, but let's just say that it walked away and just disappeared through the woods. Now what happens? Now your parasympathetic activity kicks in. Now, if you're thinking sympathetic activity and think about the analogy of speeding things up, like you're driving and all of a sudden you're accelerating. Parasympathetic is not like you're braking, all right? You're braking, your car is suddenly is going to stop. Parasympathetic is kind of like decelerating, right? You're slowing down, all right? Notice when the heart rate goes up, it slowly goes down. It doesn't go down right away, like in 1 or 2 seconds. It doesn't happen, right? It might take some time. Again, this timing has something to do with the neurotransmitter being released is not as fast as somatic nervous system. They are lightly myelinated now, all right, and it takes time to have their effect. Remember, the neurotransmitter has to bind to the receptor. There is also a gap between the here, all right, in the synapses, communication, synaptic cleft, and it takes him longer. All right. Now, parasympathetic after the bear left. This is related to the D-related activities. What is the D-related activities? D for digestion, D for defecation, D for decrease in heart rate, D for decrease in respiratory rate. So in this case, you could think about when you are relaxed, maybe the bear already left, you ate, and you're relaxed, maybe after the meal, your blood pressure is low, your heart rate is low, your respiratory rate is low. And if it was higher earlier, now you're lowering it, all right? So there is a lot of gastrointestinal tract motility. Your digestive system is already operating, your skin is warm, your pupil is normal or constricted, no longer you have it like that. Now your pupil is actually normal in size, all right? And things in that nature. Now, sometimes I tell this to the student, I said, if you're a single lady and somebody is proposing to you, look at him directly into the eye. Look to see if the pupil is dilated or is normal. All right. So what happened is if the person really loves you and is excited, it's probably going to be dilated, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for, somebody that cares for you and excited. But if the pupil is actually normal size, be very careful about that. All right, because there could be other intentions. Anyway, that's just interesting ideas, and I just wanted to share it with you. That's all. So you won't find these lectures boring after all. I don't know. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at next. All right, so in order to find out, what can the parasympathetic does, we can go ahead and take a look at this picture now and get a feel for it. So again, in terms of the eye, pupil is going to get constricted, all right? And as far as the salivary gland goes, this stimulates it. As far as the heart goes, because remember, the salivary glands, when you wanted to digest something, now it's producing the saliva. Saliva would, lubricate the food and able to digest the food easier. Next up, we got the heart. In terms of the heart, obviously, it's going to slow down, so it will have the inhibitory effect. We are looking at the parasympathetic activity. The lungs would be the same thing. It would have a lower, you're relaxed, you don't need to exchange so much oxygen. So that would have an inhibitory effect. A stimulation of the stomach, pancreas, liver, all of these are related to the digestive system. So they're all going to be stimulated. There's going to be more gastric juice to digest the food. Pancreas is going to produce enzymes and buffer to help you. Liver and gallbladder, we'll talk about this later on, but it producing the bile and storing it. So in case you wanted to digest different molecules such as fat and so on. In terms of the urinary bladder, now you're relaxed, you could urinate, all right? And in terms of the genitals, this is starting with the E, but be careful, don't get it mixed up with the sympathetic activity, and basically the process of erection. In order to have erection, you need to be relaxed, all right? And erection, again, blood needs to flow to the organ of penis, and in female, to the organ of the clitoris. So basically, there is more blood flow going into the reproductive organs. For that to happen, again, most of the time the blood vessels are dilating and you're increasing the flow. So this is right before the excitement period and so on. Okay, so interestingly enough, a lot of soldiers that came in after the Vietnam War and visited their spouse, they had difficulty having sexual intercourse with their wife. Uh, the reason was they were always nervous. Post-traumatic syndrome was taking place. In other words, they were always thinking like, the bomb is going to drop, somebody's going to come in and shoot. They were picturing, all that stuff. So there were a lot of psychological issues in that. All of those tell us one thing, and that is when you are nervous, when you are having, those type of episode, you are nervous, you're stressed out, and that cause inability for those individual to have erection, and that's why they had problem. So that's the idea behind that. Anyways, we discuss the differences between the somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Now let's go ahead and take our attention to how can we control this. The control of the autonomic nervous system lies into hypothalamus. All right, so hypothalamus, I want you to think of it as a boss. It can do a lot of different things. Imagine that you're working somewhere and you have a boss. Your boss or CEO or a manager, however you wanted to call it, all right, needs to know everything. Needs to know how many people are coming into work, how many people calling sick, how many sales calls you made, what is the sales look like, how's the marketing doing? Everything, every different department in that company, they have to report to that CEO. They would overlook everything, making sure that everything is in correct position and everybody's doing their job and the company making money and all that stuff. All right. So for that to happen, they need to communicate with the member of that company. Same thing with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is constantly communicating and controlling cerebral cortex information, which is known as reticular formation, and the spinal cord. Constantly information is coming in and going. All right, so if we go ahead and take a look at the next slide, you'll see the hypothalamus, also known as the boss. All right, and take a look at the arrow coming in and going out and so on, and take a look at all the things: urination, defecation, erection, ejaculation, pupil size regulation, respiration, heart, blood pressure, swallowing. All of these are important. And again, it gives you a sense of how this hypothalamus is controlling all that. So in a nutshell, hypothalamus can also be related into what's known as the ancient drives. Ancient drives for example, body temperature regulation, rage, pleasure, thirst, sex, hunger, So a lot of things are, controlled by the hypothalamus. This includes the blood pressure and the heart activity. This includes the body temperature, water balance, we'll talk about it later, endocrine activity, different type of hormones, and the reaction to fear and fight or flight. So is it a good idea to be one or the other? Is it better to be in the parasympathetic mode, or is it better to be on the sympathetic mode? I would say you need a balance, all right? And that's how we are hardwired. Our evolution built up based on sympathetic and parasympathetic. And when you're looking at other animals, they also have the sympathetic and parasympathetic activities too. When the deer see the wolves, sympathetic activity kicks in, and that allows that deer to survive and, jump right away and, flee from that danger. On the other hand, sympathetic activity is also important, because at one point in time it's safe. You wanted to draw the blood to the digestive system, and as a result of that, you could digest things and things in that nature. So we can see this in the animal kingdom as well, and it's part of the survival. It's part of our, passing on these genes that are involved in these activities and so on to the next offspring, and we could see how we evolved throughout the time. So the notion of being more in parasympathetic is better for the body, I think that's wrong. And the notion that always be in the sympathetic activity, that is wrong as well. You really need to use it into your advantage, depends on what you're doing and the situation as it arises. If all of a sudden there is a fire in your house, your sympathetic activity better kick in quick so you could get yourself out of harm's way, all right? If you don't react fast enough, you might burn inside, right? So on the other hand, you can't be in the sympathetic activity mode all the time, because if that's so, then that stress is going to wear the body down. Your immune system is going to get weaker. You are more prone to infectious diseases now. And as a result of that, your heart rate, your blood pressure, all of that is increasing. And again, that could cause cardiovascular diseases and such. All right. So it's really a good idea to be balanced. Homeostasis, by all means, is a state of balance. And that is the key, I believe, to the being healthy. Right now, we're facing the COVID-19 issue, when these viruses are around. Should you freak out about everything that you touch? If so, then you won't be relaxed, and pretty soon your body is actually going to get weaker. Or you should be like, not wearing mask and just go out and who cares, and not believing in anything is going to happen to you? Probably not, because chances are you might actually get it, because this is very infectious, as it turned out. So, you want it to be balanced. At time, you need to be alert. You need to kick in the sympathetic activity, but when you're digesting something, when there is no danger around and so on, you need to be in the parasympathetic activity. Surprisingly, older people, they turn out to have more neuroepinephrine in their blood. And if you recall earlier, I told you that neuroepinephrine is associated with the sympathetic activity. So again, older people have that. That means they're more nervous. Maybe they're nervous about the things that are going on. Maybe they're nervous about their pension. Maybe they're nervous about their job. Maybe they're nervous about their 401k. There's so many things to worry about, all right? They're getting older. They cannot work the same way. They might get out of job. Maybe they're worrying about that. But anyways, there's sympathetic activity more in that era. And therefore, they have more neuroepinephrine. Therefore, they're more nervous. And being nervous all the time could lower their immune system. And again, I'm not going to 100% tell you, but this might be the reason why older people are more affected against the coronaviruses as well, because they're more nervous, and also their immune system is not as strong as it used to. But there's a multifactorial issues, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but it looks like we are done with this chapter. And I hope you guys learned something and enjoyed the lecture. And you could think about other scenarios that could affect your sympathetic and parasympathetic, and think about that. What do you think is happening? Why is it happening? What do you think is going to happen to your blood pressure? What do you think, like you're watching a scary movie all of a sudden, all right? But what did you think happened to your organs that's recovered? So review that. I think you'll be in good shape. Anyway, talk to you guys soon. And that's the end of chapter 14, you guys.